was a corrections officer for 5 years. Nothing that I would have ever growing up thought like that I would end up doing. I just happened into it. Heard they were hiring, sounded like an interesting job with some time off and good benefits. So I worked in a jail, and then it felt like I was in jail. I would go to work and the sun wasn't out, and 12 hours later after my shift, I would go home and the sun wasn't out. So I mean, days of not seeing the sun, right? I did that for 5 years.
Well, it's really cool.
Answers your question.
It's really cool what you're saying, Josh. And again, I always appreciate somebody who's, very humble about their accomplishments the way you are, and recognize there was a journey, and also $1 billion. That's not like, you multiply 1 million by 12 or whatever, you get 12 million. We're talking, way more factors than that. So we're talking, tens of millions, hundreds of millions a year, I'm sure sometimes. So it's pretty impressive, man. It's also impressive to hear kind of like, okay, I took 2 bartenders and turned them into top 5 producers in the city. I mean, is there anything to that? Like, is there a method to your madness where it's like, or is it just the relationships? I mean, there's got to be a lot of leadership and development that you've had to pour into people in order to take them, from maybe not having a background at all in sales and performance and business to being top 5. Like, what would you say to that?
Why did I lose my train of thought? It's train somebody so that, they can replace you, but treat them so they'll never want to leave. Something to that effect. Train someone so well that they can totally replace you, or go out on their own, but treat them so well that they never want to. Mm-hmm. And, I've noticed there's like this trend, or maybe it's not anymore, but there was a trend for, I think it is a trend for CEOs to like sit down and come up with their vision, and what's your vision of the company, and where do you want to go? And then once you've sat down forever and come up with your vision, then, hey, tell all your 50 employees what your vision is and get them to buy in. Right. And so one of my favorite books that I read years ago, it's called Dream Manager by Matthew Kelly. And the whole premise is like, employees don't want to follow your dream. They want to create and follow their own dreams. And if you can tap into that and help them achieve their dreams, they'll always love you for that. And they won't have reasons to go looking elsewhere and to meet their own dreams. So, I took on to that really early on, and just, helping the bartender. I mean, he was like in his 20s, man. I mean, he was bottomed out, and, now he owns 2 houses. I mean, dude was driving a Lambo, until I told him that's probably not the best financial decision, but he made like a profit on it based on the way that used car sales are. So, he's doing great, man. Takes vacations, married, probably going to have their kid next year. So, that's amazing. I've just always wanted to invest in their dreams, and so in that sense, my dream is watching them, fulfill their dreams. So.
Well, I definitely have follow-ups on this one, because I love the Dream Manager, by the way. I read it, probably 15 years ago at this point, and then I reread it again maybe 10 years ago. And I went so far as hiring a Dream Manager for my staff that would give them coaching calls and mapped out their dreams. This was back in, maybe 2017, 2018. And I was paying a Dream Manager to work with my staff to get them towards their dreams. And I love this. And I'm very interested to hear, because then a friend of mine, Dane Espigard, you might know Dane as well, Front Row Dad. He has the Dream Machine. He's, he does a lot of dream summits, dream workshops, and it's really been fun. We'll probably have him on the podcast at some point soon. I'm very interested in, how did you incorporate this dream? Like, what was the strategy? How did you incorporate it? Did you go as far as hiring a dream manager to sit down with your staff? Did you do more of like a Berghoff exchange program where it was like collaborative conversation? Like, how did you document it? How did you communicate it? How did they communicate it? Like, what if you could actually go through your structure and your infrastructure of incorporating dream management? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So you're probably going to be super underwhelmed when I tell you my strategy, but it worked. So it was like three components. The first one was the workshop that I already do every year. And so that was big, and they still do it. It's been years. And it's not even like for my real estate team anymore. It's like anyone all industries come to this, but my real estate guys still come to this. So there they kind of plan out their dreams for the year. The second thing was I would just meet them one-on-one and just ask the question from the book, which is, what dream are you chasing, right? And then the third super unscientific method that I used, which was not hiring a dream manager, was just writing their dreams on little 3x5 cards and taping them to my wall so that I saw them every day. And then that would prompt me to remember, oh, that's right, so-and-so's goal is to buy a house this year. I can ask them how they're doing on this. So-and-so wanted to lose weight. It was a constant reminder to me to like, oh, ask them how this is going when I see them.
That last part was not that underwhelming, dude. That's actually, that was pretty good.
I guess I just meant like it's super basic, right? There's no tech involved or anything like that. It's just in my face. I need everything in my face or I forget, man. I live by to-do lists and just things in my face, right where I can see them.
Well, I think it's great because how many managers have sat down and ran the workshop, right? And I guarantee there's a listener right now who's listening and they're like, yeah, this is me. I'm willing to admit it. And I've even done this in the past for sure, where it's like you run the workshop, everyone comes up with their dreams. They even tell you their dreams, and then you don't even ask about it, for the next 6 months, 12 months, right? And it's like, oh yeah, wasn't one of your dreams this year to do this? How did we do on that? And it's like, we didn't do anything, and nothing happened. And nothing comes of these, workshops sometimes because there's no follow-up and there's no intentionality. So like you basically have a vision board for your people on your wall. That's what I heard. You know what their vision is and you're helping co-create that vision with them. That's how much you care about them. And that, really speaks to why they don't want to leave. I would love to get into kind of some of your catchphrases. I love this idea of the best version ever being, 27 personal growth books in one. I love some of these catchphrases and quotes that you like to kind of bring forth. Hope is not a strategy. And you also kind of hit on like, it really seems like you have a hard work component and a component that really brings people to like, hey, hours matter more than talent and these sorts of ideas. Can you speak to those a little bit? Like when you think about, the ethos of your brand and what you like to really get people to tap into, what would you say are the most important elements of that for you?
Yeah, I think the most important elements are, look, your life's purpose, it can be becoming your best version ever. And you get to decide what that looks like, right? It's like, there's no outside forces that you need to be pressured by or expectations that you need to meet. So, I mean, in the beginning, the book starts off with, living a life that others expect of you and why that's a bad idea. And then we just kind of crush that right from the beginning and say, hey, your purpose is actually to become your best version ever, but you get to decide what that looks like and it gets to change as often as you want it to, right? I mean, for some people, if they can just go surfing every day after work, they're happy. That's their best version ever. And that's good. You talked about hours matter more than talent. I really realized that when I decided to learn to play the drums, right? Because I just think most people think, that's something that people are just born with, this talent, or they just have a knack for it. And as I was learning, every time I would go to learn something new or a new beat, I realized it was just playing it in super slow motion. It's like, okay, this hand goes here, and then the next thing is this foot's going to go. And then it was just slowly speeding it up. And, I just realized that like anything you see someone else doing is evidence that you could do it. They just have way more hours doing it. Right. I just, going back to the anecdotal 10,000 hour rule, right? Like the saying is, if you put 10,000 hours into anything, you're going to be pretty near expert level at it. And so when you see someone who's an expert at something, they just have more hours than you. That's really all it is.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think, I have a piano, I'm a pianist, and I think all the time it has nothing to do with, you're talented or whatever. Like, you sit down and you practice for hours and hours and hours, and you get good at something. And it's something that I constantly have to remind my kids, my 7-year-old at least, because he's starting to learn. It's like, hey, we got to be patient with yourself and all these things. Someone asked me like, how did you learn this stuff around business? Like, is this just like come easy to you? It's like, nobody pops out of the womb knowing how to run a business. Like, of course not, it's all just hours and experience. Everything that we've learned is hours and experience, right? So nobody's like naturally better at this or that and the other. Just show up and put in the hours. I think that's really good stuff. Mike, what's coming up for you here?
My curiosity was you mentioned that the real estate journey started more towards like that late 20s. And I know in the late teens, it was like girlfriend got pregnant, trying to get like the quote unquote real job. I would love to hear just that gap, that gap in there, because some of the listeners are on the journey, like moving towards that dream of having that start in that company, or they're still kind of in survival mode and trying to figure some things out. So I think getting pregnant early in life is something that some audience members could relate to, and I'd love to just have you share that. How was that process? I asked that question to another one of our guests too, and I really loved the way he explained it, and I'd love to hear how you explained your journey as well, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, the gap was it was grueling, right? I mean, I just remember my 20s, just working these jobs and not really feeling like there was more to life, but quite honestly, not knowing what the answers were, and not knowing at the time. I wished I'd had I'll just give you an example. I wish that I don't wish anything, but I should, I wish that I had access to like the book that I wrote right now, right? Like that kind of information. I didn't have any kind of like personal development type things in my life. It wasn't until, dude, I just like just worked away. And then I just remember turning 30 and thinking, if I don't do anything different, like before I know it, I'm going to wake up and I'll be 40 and another 10 years have gone by. Right. And so, the pain of staying the same has to be more painful than the fear of change. And that's what happened. Right. I just decided like, can't do this anymore.
So these individuals that are in their 20s, you literally just fast forwarded a decade. We went from your girlfriend got pregnant at 17. You're like, yeah, I just did a bunch of shit, and then I turned 30 and realized like I need a wake up call. Some of these individuals, like some of the people listening, they have their parents have kids that are in their late teens, early 20s, or someone's listening and they are in their early 20s, and I don't want to skip this where we give them permission. It's like, yeah, your 20s don't matter. You can fuck up all you want, and then you could get 30 and have a wake up call. And you could repair it, and just like I did, and then read my book. Or I would love to get into what were some of those consequences that you experienced, and what were some of the painful lessons that you endured that maybe a parent listening says, damn, okay, I probably should parent my kid through some of that stuff. Or if it's someone in their 20s saying, all right, I don't want to have to wait till I'm 30 to have this wake up call. Like if you could like really feel into some of those, what were the lessons? What were the consequences? What were the stories? Like what was it like being this version of you? Yeah.
Okay. I was a corrections officer, jail guard for 5 years, right? Nothing that I would have ever growing up thought like that I would end up doing. I just happened into it, right? Heard they were hiring, sounded like an interesting job with some time off and good benefits. So I worked in a jail, and then it felt like I was in jail because, I would go to work and the sun wasn't out, and 12 hours later after my shift, I would go home and the sun wasn't out. So, days of not seeing the sun, right? I did that for 5 years. So now I'm around 25. And I was just like, I got to get out of here. So real estate sounded interesting. It was 2005. Everything was going amazing, right? So I jumped into that. I do want to rewind on something you said, right? So if someone in their 20s is listening to this podcast, they're already way ahead of where I was in my 20s, right? Because I didn't do anything like this. If parents are listening, start feeding start feeding the kids the information early, right? That's what I started doing. Just like, even if they don't want to hear it, at least like exposing them to it so that when they are ready, they know where to look. Um, One idea that I had heard, and I haven't implemented it, but it could be an idea, is just, paying your kids to read books, and write a book report on it when it's done, right? Um, Again, I haven't implemented it, but I always thought that could be an interesting idea, right? Here, read this and write a summary about it, and I'll pay you. But anyway, back to my story, right? I mean, I jump into real estate in 05. It's going okay. 07 hits. I do not have the capital or the relationships to kind of sustain me through, the biggest market crash of our lifetimes. So I did the trifecta of bad credit, right? I realized I couldn't pay my bills and filed bankruptcy. And then a few months later, I realized that one of those bills that I couldn't pay was my mortgage. So I lost my house. And then a few months later, I thought it's time to burn the boats, and got a divorce. So that was the trifecta in 08. So I'm renting a 2-bedroom apartment.
And that woman that you divorced, was that the same one that you got pregnant at 17?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah.
She was with you through this valley that you were in with as a correctional officer as well.
Yeah. So my son was born at when I was 17. Our daughter was born when I was 20. And so, I just thought, like, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to get married and buy a house and all that good stuff. So yeah, we were together about 12 years, until I was 30. And then, so yeah, 08 comes, renting an apartment, 2 bedrooms, so that each kid can have a bedroom. I get behind on my rent. I get behind on, it's like, dude, I already filed bankruptcy and lost a house the year before, and now I'm like behind on my bills again. I think the only reason I didn't get evicted is because the landlord was also a real estate agent, and she knew what was going on. But I kept grinding. I mean, that's a whole story in itself, right? How I switched to real estate. But so I told you about the girl who said I only made $4,000. So the next day I just drove to a real estate office, signed up, bought a bunch of open house signs, put them out. Bunch of people came in. I wrote an offer. The offer didn't get accepted, but I just thought, you know what, if I just do this 40 hours a week, like, there's no way I'm not going to sell one house a month. And so, yeah, later on that year, I sold some houses and caught up on my bills.